Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Fantasy Premier League Show. I'm your host, Gally, coming to you from Western Massachusetts. Joined in his festive garb is our good friend from Chicago, Ali. What have you? No. Oh, we'll talk about that. Maybe save your lineup next time. Might not have worked
It
either.
wouldn't have mattered.
How we doing out in Chicago today?
Oh,
the Chicago land,
I was going to say, good festive. I'm here to bestow upon everyone the wonderful gifts that we have, which are our ideas and our comments on the fantasy game. And, gifts you haven't asked for that you probably should just rather ask for Cole at this point. But nonetheless, here we are.
Yeah, I'm going to give everybody this year, from a fantasy standpoint, probably what I gave them last year, which is bad advice for the next 2.5 to 3 weeks. If you do what I don't say, you'll probably do better, but I'm going to tell you to follow along because this is what I believe will get me to the top. Speaking of getting to the top, let's take a look at the American Scouser Cup standings. This is the live updated table from Live FPL. Thought this was interesting. No surprise here. Cade is still leading the way, unused substitute, over 1,000 points overall, top 5,000 in the world, top 4,500 in the world. Really amazing. I didn't look to see whether or not they had actually captained Haaland or Salah, and it was an auto-captain kind of switch thing. But it's still just a really great team, obviously. Got a slight green arrow. Must feel good to get a slight green arrow when you're in the top 5,000 in the world. But just really, really impressive overall. Good squad value. Built pretty well right now. Has a few flags right now. So this will be an interesting week for him. I figured here it was only fair to pull out as many. Normally we pull 10 teams, our top 10. But unfortunately I couldn't get the Eversource ad off my screen. So it wasn't going to fit. So I apologize to our Thursday night podcast co-host, Trevor Utley, who is currently in 10th place, who doesn't see his name there. But I would be remiss and probably would be sleeping in a different bedroom and or on the couch if I didn't acknowledge the fact that my wife is the one who has the pretty cool name and Klopp back. And yeah, she came up with that on her own. She's so proud of it. It's been her name for 3 years. I tell her you're supposed to change the fantasy name every year. She reminds me, until you beat me or come up with a better name, don't tell me how to run my team. She's right on both accounts. She is literally 3,000 spots outside of the top 100K. And like usual, I am in awe of my beautiful, brilliant, and smart wife. And I'm frustrated and pissed off. And she doesn't listen to this, which is probably why she does better than all of us. But yeah, so Kelly has put herself into a good position going into the holiday season. Very, very excited. Any thoughts or comments how this top 9 is rolling out and how we're going to somehow catch up to my wife in the standings?
The exciting thing is that we're at least close, right? I think last year around this time it wasn't as close. So it's within touching distance. If I had just not tried to do the worst thing in the world and not captaining Salah, then things could be a little different. But hey, this is why we play the game, and sometimes you got to take chances. Honestly, we'll get to it, but this week didn't hurt me as much as it could have. It hurt a little, but it definitely could have been much worse, I think.
Oh, yeah. I thought you actually rebounded really well. And to Kelly's point, like even last week, her transfer last week was Ariel de Sanchez, so she'd have a keeper that was playing. And genuinely just blew up and backfired in her face as, Sanchez goes off injured. And it just, who knows what she's going to do now. She's got a lot of work to do with that. But it's just one of those situations where, when it's working for you, it just keeps working for you. So we look at last week's team of the week. Little bit more of names we were expecting to see, and Son and Salah, even Cunha. And I've seen some shouts for Raul. Adinga has gotten, I think it's 5 or 6 consecutive starts and gotten at least 70 minutes in the Premier League. So he's clearly moving his way into De Zerbi's first team. picture on the big matches. So, any regrets, thoughts about this team of the week, like ways you could have got into it? I think you were the one who mentioned Decore last week as a random type player you could get yourself into or try to convince yourself. Clearly, you didn't. You'd be a lot happier of a player. So, outside of not captaining Salah
Yeah.
and having a captain who played, what else? Anything else here jump out at you that frustrates you that you didn't have in your team or you might have had on your team?
I mean, I had Son too, right? So I could have captained Son as well. And unfortunately, I went for a differential. And, I know the morning of, I shared the screenshot of it was, you could see the screenshot, the time was right, but the actual lineup wasn't. And so you could see that I literally closed my phone on the page because it didn't update. So either way, it would have either been Hwang Hee-chan or Watkins, and both did be a little dirty. I think the only one that I necessarily kind of feel that I maybe have missed out on is Udogi, because I was really high on Udogi going into the season. I thought he was a wonderful option at that price point, and I think he still is. It's just a matter of kind of maybe getting that consistency and finding a good spot for him. I know right now I am torn between him and Pedro Porro, and we can talk about that obviously a little bit later. But other than that, outside of Son and Salah, I don't necessarily see any of these scores being sustainable at all. A Fulham defender, you're going to need them to score or assist to get those kinds of points because they're not keeping clean sheets for shit. But I mean, looking at a Fulham attacker, maybe there's some merit there because they're scoring 3-4 goals a game. But having a Bournemouth defender there, again, you need to look out on a goal, otherwise they're going to be giving you clean sheets. So I think we saw a couple of the names we typically see. And then it's sort of how we see most weeks. You see the 3 or 4 names you expect, and then the rest are sort of just filled in by random good performances that you will probably not see again for a few weeks.
Yeah, the one that I think, is on the uptick in just form and overall play, the team scoring goals, as you mentioned. I think there is something to be said for Raul Jimenez as an actual viable option, especially if you're coming off of Holland. We're going to talk about that and what your plans are there and how you're going to play your forward line. I could see guys actually using the Holland money and going and taking Holland to Watkins and then taking the other 4.5 million or 4 million or whatever they have and taking the fodder Archer or Morris and taking that one up to Darwin and playing 3 strikers for a while.
Sure.
And actually, looking at probably divesting a little bit from a midfielder or just being like, listen, I know I have the template 5 midfield, but I have to pick the right one each week to put on the bench or put one of the strikers on the bench, and then you have your auto sub if you need it. I just think that might be the way to go through these next 3-4 match weeks when Holland is in question. So speaking of the big Norwegian striker, reports are there were some people today that had pictures of him that were clearly looked like he was in Spain or in another country, and they were timestamped as today. So if he's not in England right now, it's pretty clear he's not playing this weekend. The issue is Pep isn't scheduled to speak, and during the open portion of the media where you get the live content, they won't actually talk about these types of things. So we won't get anything till the embargoed quotes come out, and that'll be after the deadline. So I know you don't own Holland, so I need you to talk as if you did or what you think strategy. And don't think of it from your standpoint. I know you wouldn't, but if we're talking to people who own Holland right now, there are options, right? There is selling Holland, there is just benching Holland, and then there is the selling Holland with the idea of what is your route back to Holland.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest concern that folks have. The best part about Holland is his price doesn't move.
Right.
Because he's owned by so many people, even when he's sold by a ton, his price isn't going to drop and it doesn't really go up. So you need about 14 million to get Erling Haaland back into your team at any point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you owned Erling Haaland, you were Chris or Kelly Gallivan, with 1 or 2 transfers, what would your overall strategy be? And which way would you be more comfortable and or like do you have to use 2 transfers if you transfer out Erling Haaland? Because that's so the whole argument is I can't put that much money on my bench.
Right.
But then you got to take a -4 to not put that much goddamn money on your bench.
Right. So do you rather put the whole $14 million player on your bench instead of just kind of having funds out there that you're not using? I think for Haaland users, I mean, for Haaland owners, I think it's really important to take a look and try and figure out what you want the makeup of your team to be over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Because if you find yourself in a world where you don't think you can get off of Haaland, then you just put him on the bench and you wait until after this week until there's more concrete information, and then you go from there and possibly pocket a transfer. So then you can use the two to get down to where you want to be. If you're already feeling that you want to get off of Haaland, I think you mentioned earlier going down to a Watkins is really nice, right? If you've been trying to maybe move up to Trent and you haven't had a way to move up to Trent, this would be the time. You move down from Haaland to a Watkins, from Haaland maybe to an Alvarez. I know Alvarez hasn't been returning as much, and I might be saying this because I've just been on the Alvarez train for the whole year, and this is the week he's going to get more points. But I think having a bit of that steady attack there. And if you don't believe in Alvarez so much, you can go down from Haaland to whatever forward, and then maybe bump up one of maybe an Anthony Gordon up to a Grealish. Something that where you feel that you get part of that City pie without necessarily losing out on too much. I think the tough thing with Haaland right now is that just there is that uncertainty, right? And even if there was the certainty of him being healthy, we're not getting the same returns that we did last year. And we're really starting to tiptoe that line of how much money can you afford having on one player that isn't consistently giving you 5-6 points. And that's a difficult thing to toe, right? I think because he can't give you clean sheet points. He will never give you bonus points unless he's scoring goals. So unless he's scoring 1 or 2 goals a game, it's a big waste of money, in my opinion, to have $14 million there for someone that isn't getting you those points. So I think if you are sitting on him, like we've talked about, you go down somewhere that you're comfortable. Are you, speaking to a Haaland owner, are you contemplating moving down from him this week, or are you going to stand pat and wait after the weekend?
Yeah, so I'm on the fence because I could move down from him personally. I only have 1 free transfer this week. I think Kelly has 2, which is why she feels like she has to make a reconstruction, take the money, and go down to player. Plus, she's right outside the top 100,000. So this is a week where if she hits these moves right, if to your point, if she drops out of Haaland to Watkins, right, and then goes up from any defender she has to Trent, she goes from playing literally nobody, her $4 million defender. And I don't even think she can because I think it's Charlie Taylor and he's suspended. Trippier's suspended. She's flagged all over the place. So if she drops down, but then she gets up to Trent, she walks into this week, not touching her score, moving up in the standings immediately just on her overall play. And then the players she has Son, she has Salah, she has, she's got a stacked team. So she puts out the template midfield and it all works. With me, I only have 1 transfer. I've already taken my, that 1 -4 and it turned out to be a net gain. So I didn't lose points in the overall standings, but I hated doing it. I said I wasn't going to take any all year, but it was the right thing to do at the time for my team. I would do it again this week if I thought I could really improve my side. There's part of me that thinks about rolling Haaland 1 week, but there's a blank. He's not playing next week. So even if he plays this week, City is off next week. So they go off to Saudi Arabia for the Club World Cup. So with a blank match week, it's almost to me like now's the time to get off Haaland. Then you have the blank. Now, where it probably hurts you is you probably can't bring him back in 19 because you're going to spread that money out, right? But in 20, most of our teams are going to lose either Salah or Son for 4 to 6 weeks for their international tournaments in mid-season. So in 20 is about when I have to think about probably shipping out Mo, which is an easy route back into Holland if I can leave myself 2 transfers. So to me, I feel like you make the move off Holland now. The question is what you do with the money. And if you don't have 2 transfers, do you take the -4? And I'm going to have to play the numbers between tonight and tomorrow morning. I am not convinced on what I'll do. I already have Dominic Solanke. So, I heard a guy say this on a podcast today. He was like, yeah, he's like, I'm just so excited because like Holland is my route to Solanke. And then he paused and he went, did I just say that out loud? And I'm not even kidding. He goes, here's the crazy part. Even if they were playing Brentford in match week 18, if I lined up the form of both players and Bournemouth fixtures and cities, I actually bet on Solanke to come back with a bigger return over those 3 matches. I'm not kidding when I say this, and I'm dead serious to you. I'm genuinely considering captaining the Big Dom.
I am so glad you said that because I was going to as well. I'm transferring him in.
I'm not saying that I'm doing it, but I'm actually considering it this week. And if I don't do it this week, I'm very likely going to do it in a coming week. So let's take a look here at Speak of the Devil, and he is at the top of your list. Former Chelsea Academy player, former Liverpool Young Player of the Year, makes his move, struggles. Fair to say, people question whether he was a Premier League striker, and I think it was right to question it. I don't think it's right to question it anymore. I think now is the question is I hope he stays there because he can become like a really great player at the club and then eventually move on if he wants to. I would hate to see him jump to like a Spurs or somewhere that offers him a ton of money or go back to Chelsea. You know what I mean? Like, he'll never come back to Liverpool because I think he's actually too smart a kid. He tried his hand. It didn't work out. But I think the people that are bringing him in are brilliant. I brought him in weeks ago. It's probably why I think it's such a good idea. You already mentioned you own Son. Little interesting for people to be bringing in Son right now. No, I get it because there's so much extra money out in the game because of all the Holland sales.
Right.
And that, of course, leads into the Watkins play. But you mentioned Pedro Porro before. I have been riding on Pedro Porro for about a month, maybe less. I think he's the best defender in the game. I don't think he's better than Trippier or Trent on the overall because of their set piece prowess and the fact they actually take direct free kicks, and he doesn't do that as much. But I think from open play, he actually has the greatest chance of anyone for a goal.
He goes much further than either one of those guys.
And the places that they put him and the way that he runs offensively, I think there's a week where he's going to give us like a 25-point match eventually. Like there's going to be a week where he'll be the guy though that gets 2 goals, an assist, a clean sheet. Like it can happen for a player like him. 3 bonus points, and the next thing you know, he's at a 24 and he has the highest score of any player in the year.
Yeah.
Watkins and Gordon. Gordon's interesting just because he had the little bit of a knock or came off limping in the midweek match. He's played so many matches. At some point, Harvey Barnes is finally going to come back and he's going to start playing. I'm a little worried about Gordon owners, and I know you're one of them. That's not someone I would love on the flag. So I think if I was using my Holland money, it would probably be to take a player like him to Saka or take a player like him to anyone but Bruno Fernandes. Who on this list would you buy first, and who would you stay away from?
They're probably. I mean, it's nice to lay it out because who I'd buy first would be Solanke, and who I would stay away from would be Gordon. I know that Gordon's on my team, but like you said, Barnes is coming back. Gordon picked up a little bit of a knock. I do think though there is some merit to having Gordon just because of his price tag. I don't think $6 million is atrocious for what he gives you. At $6 million, you're not expecting a return every single week. But what he can give you at $6 million, I think is pretty decent. I think maybe to your point about Son, maybe Son would be the more avoidable one only because of his price. And if you could rather do a Saka instead of a Son, then maybe this would be the time to sort of move off of that. But Spurs fixtures, man, they look so good for the next few weeks. So not as good as Bournemouth's, but it's one of those things where I look at this and I go, all right, all 5 of these guys are on my team. That makes me feel really good. What the hell is about to happen is kind of where I'm looking at it.
That's fair. Talking about teams, let's look at the guys going out. Haaland, obviously, 585,000 means just 7.5 million people own him. Trippier, almost as many exits. And Embuemo, Douglas Luiz, and Bruno Fernandes. So, Douglas Luiz, is it a 1-game ban or is he actually hurt? I didn't know if I missed something with him. Bruno Fernandes is banned for the Liverpool match because he was afraid of getting slacked again at Anfield, so he took the day off by picking up a card before the end of the match. And if you are a United supporter, please comment, put something in there. If you have a defense for this player and why you want to ever see him wear the armband for your club again, please come to his defense. Because I've defended the actual footballer because I know how good he is, but I'm done defending him. And it was bowing out of a match. He quit on your team once in a slacking. He quit before you even showed up. With a week to go, he was like, you know what? Before we play the biggest match of the year, let me quit on the second biggest match we have this week. Unbelievable. So Brian Embuemo, obviously he's injured now for a bit. Trippier suspended. Fernandes suspended. Did you look up, is Luiz suspended?
Just suspended for a week, yeah.
So it's just a one match suspension, but I'm sorry, people. If you have Douglas Luiz in your team at this point with the midfielders on option, I understand he scored at times some big points this year, but that's helped you get up in the standings, and ultimately you're just higher in the standings than you should be because you had Douglas Luiz in your team this long to get that many points. There are times where guys get lots of points and they're not good players to have in your team. It doesn't mean if you keep playing that way, you will be good all year. That's the biggest thing about this game. Playing the game right will get you where you want to be. But Haaland, Trippier, Fernandes, especially Haaland and Trippier, we talked a lot about Haaland. We understand it's injury related and, of course, the blank week coming up. Is Trippier about form? Is Trippier about Newcastle falling off, his own kind of falling off, or is it a 1-week suspension and with all the extra money, it's so easy to get the Trent?
Yeah, I don't know if you'd want to go from Trippier to Trent. Just seems like a waste, right? I don't know if that is enough. I feel like it's a lateral move because they're going to provide you similar things at similar prices. So, I mean, I have both, so maybe that's where I'm looking at it from. But it just doesn't make sense for me to go from there to there. I am going to be honest. I am a little shocked that so many people have gotten off Trippier. Looking at the last 5 weeks, though, he's at -1, 1, 12, 1, 1. So there has been some rough form, and he is suspended for a bit. But I think he's sort of the perfect guy to just stash on your bench for the week and then bring him back following this week. Because I think Newcastle, they're just riddled with injuries right now. And I think now being out of Champions League is going to only help them moving forward as opposed to hurt them. Because now they can actually, they might be able to rest a little bit and they might have more focus in the league more so than before. And so I don't know. I'm shocked by the Trippier news and the amount that people are getting off of him. But yeah, so that's where I'm at with that.
I understand where some of the Newcastle supporters were saying it's not a good thing that we're out of Europe. I wish we were still at least in Europa. We could have jetted down into that tournament, and who knows, Newcastle could have gone on a nice run in Europa, but they're also playing Thursday and Sunday now the rest of the Premier League season, and it's not like they're firmly entrenched in second, third, or fourth place, and they can confidently believe they'll be in the top 5 by the end of the year. I thoroughly believe by the end of the season, England will have 5 teams in the Champions League next year. And with that, we're really all playing for the top 5 to make Champions League. It may be qualifying round, whatever, but you'll put an English team up against another qualifying team from across Europe. So I understand where people say, like, oh, it'd be nice to be in Europa. But I think it's more important, to your point, for Newcastle to buy a couple players in January, get guys back healthy, eventually get Tonali back in the summer, and then rebuild for next season and try to push on even more. They're not winning the league this year. They're already out of all of Europe, and they are still alive in the League Cup. So, they're in a trophy and they're playing in the FA Cup. So, I mean, they might have actually been eliminated. I'm not. Yeah, they're in the FA Cup. They're in the League Cup. So, I mean, they're right there. So they are on their way to try to still win something, but ultimately they need to just get back into the Champions League for a second straight year and be in the knockout rounds and have big matches at St. James's Park and give those fans and supporters something to believe in, give those owners something to spend money on.
Yep.
I mean, look, somebody is going to give Mbappe $1 million a week. And if you are those guys in Saudi Arabia and he can't go to Madrid because they won't pay the money, and PSG's like, we're not paying you anymore either, like they say they're not going to, why wouldn't you put the Brinks truck out and be like, come be the face of this project? We'll give you the $1 million. We'll give you, and just come do what you want and play in England, show everyone you're the best. Like, as well as I do, eventually they're going to sign one of those type players. It isn't, Isak and Bruno Guimaraes and these and Sandro Tonali. That was the beginning. Like, everybody forgets that, right? Like, it was Yaya Toure, and then it was, they first got Vincent Kompany, then they got Yaya Toure, then they got David Silva, and then Kun Aguero. And on the way to it, they got Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland and Rodri, who won them the big honors. But you start somewhere and then you build to it. I'm not saying they're going to sign Mbappe, but like, he should have lost to that team twice in the Champions League. And if it wasn't for like the most fraudulent handball in the history of calls by a VAR official, Newcastle wins that game in Paris and they're still in the Champions League.
Right.
And they might have even won the group, which is even more insane. But I still think Newcastle fantasy assets are really, really strong and really, really good players. That doesn't mean you should listen to me because, well, I'm not doing that well. But I think I am on 3 weeks in a row, maybe, with the Green Arrow. And I was outside the top 500,000, I think, when I started that climb. This one was looking really well for a while, right up until the worst match ever played by Chelsea. Didn't help that I decided to bring someone in and brought in a guy who got benched. That wasn't fun. Nor that Matoma didn't start. Nor the fact that Morris didn't start. And then Trippier put up a negative. So, all things considered, it was just an absolute shit-ass week, except for my captain didn't play, which meant I moved up in the rank. And it's one of those things that is kind of frustrating about the game. But it's also why you make sure you set your lineup every single week. Because the week before, I had Saka as my vice captain, and if I hadn't altered it to change it just in case to the guy I actually thought was my second best player, I wouldn't have had it on Mo. And I saw that a lot on people. Like, I saw a few guys who had, like, the captaincy on Haaland and, like, the vice captaincy was on, like, their keeper.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't matter. And that's ludicrous. So I'm good with my team. I mean, obviously I have the issues. Haaland not playing, Trippier being, suspended. If I didn't want to do a transfer, that puts me in a tough bind. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to move Haaland out. I already have Solanke. I'm in one of those tough spots. There's no midfielder there that I really want to get off of to move to Son. Like, maybe it would be Matoma. I hate transferring out a player you just transferred in. It just feels like such a waste. And Chelsea has great fixtures, and I'll be so pissed when Sterling has his random 2-goal, 2-assist afternoon. And it happens at least a couple times a year.
Yeah.
He gets like 8 goals a year, and they come in 4 games. And I never own him when it happens. But I just feel like I have to stay with him. So it's, to me, because I'm not going to Son, I look at this and think to myself, like, do I do Haaland? Do I drop Haaland here to Watkins and then reinvest in defense and take someone up, take cash up to Trent, bring him in and drop, obviously Trippier to the bench, and then just go big heavy and use Trippier or Trent, whichever one's not in form, as my second transfer to get back to Haaland. So like drop them down and use somebody else to go up. But then I have to question, do I take the cash and how do I get up? What do I do with Morris? Like Morris either has to go down to Archer or down to Semedo, but I don't like having 2 Bournemouth attackers, or he needs to go up. But if he goes up, like, where am I going up to? Am I going up to Darwin? Am I going up to, there's such a weak overall position at the striker position, but if you pay attention, you can really find value and get points out of it and real differentials. So it's a tough one for me. I mean, Haaland to Watkins just feels like I have to do it. It almost feels like the effective ownership of Watkins over the next few weeks is almost Haaland-esque.
Yeah, it's gonna hurt you more to not have him. It's gonna come back to Haaland of last year, right? Or if you didn't have him, you were really, really hurt.
Now, if you were me, would you be considering going Haaland to Watkins and then taking that money and bringing a Matoma to Son? Or would you keep the cash and spread it through my defense and more build out? Because this bench is really shitty now that Cash isn't playing.
Yeah, that's a tough bench, man. I would move off of Haaland down to Watkins for sure. I don't think I would touch the midfield because I like the midfield, and I think exactly to your point of having Sterling and Palmer and looking at Chelsea's fixtures, they're insane over the next 5 weeks. They're probably the best fixtures of any club over the next 5 weeks. So I wouldn't want to come off of that. You could potentially use some of that Haaland money. I know you're not moving up necessarily so much, but you could take a cash to a Chelsea defender. I'm not expecting, maybe not as many Chelsea clean sheets over the next 5 weeks, but they're going to be part of the attack too, as much as they're going to be part of the defense. So I do think there's a strong case to be made to move down from Haaland to Watkins to then take cash up to a defender that's actually going to play, because then you have your 3 defenders, your 5 mids, and then you still have your 2 forwards that are going to be really good together.
Yeah, and it's not just this week. It's and I think I could go Haaland. I think I could go Haaland to Watkins, cash to Trent if I wanted to.
Liverpool's defensively, the fixtures aren't great, I'd say.
But I will say this: seeing Endo start today, and thinking about how, and knowing McAllister's now out, and the fact that Gomez didn't start today in Europe, makes me think Gomez is starting at right back for Liverpool this weekend and Trent starting in the 6 against United.
God.
And if Trent is playing in an advanced position for 90 minutes against a team that they want to score 8 against, it's not the worst match to have Trent in.
Right.
And, United is going to be without, it looks like they're going to be without Shaw. They're going to be without Maguire. They're going to be they are banged up on all levels. It's going to be starting Johnny Evans. There's a chance he starts Johnny Evans and Lindelof at center backs against a Liverpool team playing in front of the largest crowd Anfield's ever had. Like that doesn't, I don't know. For me, that seems like mistakes and goals, and like I'm not even questioning it. Like, I've heard a lot of people talk about it. This week, I'm captaining Salah because when Salah plays United, he likes to score goals.
Yeah,
and when they're bad, he scores lots of goals.
Yeah.
And I just feel like they know that it's ripe for the pickings, and it'll probably be a 0-0 draw. And I won't buy Trent because that's how it'll work. But I do think there is a shot that Trent actually is playing in the midfield this weekend, because I could see Klopp saying, like, I need the best defenders I have, and I just don't know a world that he starts Endo against United. That just feels like we're playing with 10 men with 42 minutes on the clock. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels, and you know me, I have actually supported Endo. And
Yeah.
I think you have to think about those things when you're thinking about how you play the attacking players, because I could see it being like a very scary midfield of, like, that's why I always felt like it would be Jones, but then he was starting today, which made no sense. I thought Trent, Soboslai, Jones would be scary enough in the midfield, but at least you had Jones to, like, give you possession and play the role. It's going to be really, really interesting to see how they line up. Now, let's look at your team here, because I think you have a major shout for this weekend, whether you'll pull it off or do it or not. But what are your plans right now? What are you thinking? Theoretically, you don't need to make a move if you don't want.
I need to make at least one, because then I'll lose a transfer, because I've got 2 free transfers right now. So
Okay.
I do need to make at least one, and I haven't confirmed it yet. The screen is up, but right now, and of course, this is a little worrisome before the United game, because I feel like the United game, there's a chance for Darwin to have a couple of returns, just like last year. He had a
Don't
couple of
do it.
goals.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I'm going down from Darwin to Solanke, and then moving from Gahey up to Pedro Porro. I think that is where my mind is at right now. And
so with 2 free transfers, I like the move. I'll tell you right now, what I don't like about it is, over the next 5 game weeks, there is no way in your heart of hearts you can believe that Julian Alvarez is going to outscore Darwin Nunez with a blank in 18. He can't. He can't. You're actually transferring off a player you're going to have to bench who hasn't. No, look at his numbers. He's actually returned just as few. He's not been great. His underlying numbers are even worse. Do you realize he only had 4 in a week where he led the line for Manchester City? He had the least amount of touches in the box of any attacking player. He is not a center forward. When Haaland's not playing, he's not the same player. So if you play him this week, you don't have Haaland. I actually think Darwin is an outside captain shot for this week. I think people with Darwin should be banging him for this week. And the fact that he didn't start today in Europe and Gakpo did lets you know he's leading the line against United. That guy running at Johnny Evans, and not Johnny Evans from 2002, who would still shit his pants if Darwin was running at him. I really do. We all make fun of him, and he might hit the post 5 times. I'm not telling you to captain him, but I think there is an argument that he is like he's a marquee differential for this week. And for a team like yours, where you're going to need some players to probably play, and guys you'd be okay rotating out, whether it's, the Wolves players, even Gordon for him. Like, to me, the Alvarez thing, I would be going Alvarez to Solanke if I were you. And it's not like a Darwin Love thing. I might go off Darwin in 2 weeks. Right. But I just think that with a blank in 18, you're basically making a transfer and having a guy that gets benched next week. It just feels, I don't know. It feels, and Alvarez hasn't been good this year when Haaland hasn't played. So,
yeah,
I just kind of,
I
look at that and think to myself, like, you might, and you rode Darwin so long. Like, this is the thing. I think sometimes, like, when you play a player, when you hang with a guy so long and he's struggled, and let's be honest, I mean, you're a stats guy, so you look at the numbers. His numbers are everything you want. Touches, big chances, like, and, the old adage that strikers have to score goals, they score, yes. And guys who get lots of opportunities and miss them are also the guys who are always in the right position to get opportunities. And that is also a talent and skill earned, not something that is just naturally there all the time. So I think for me personally, so I hope you do the opposite because I want to catch you and I'm 5 points behind you. I think it's probably time that you make the move off Alvarez if you really want to bring in Solanke this week. If you do Darwin, for me, there's a lot more FOMO in losing Darwin than there is Alvarez. Because I think Alvarez can give you that. I think Alvarez can give you that 5. I think Darwin can give you 15.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree, and I think I'm in the same boat with both Darwin and Alvarez that I've had them for so long, and I do believe in both of them, and I think that's the problem. And yeah, I mean, I probably was a little too rash in jumping off of Darwin for this week specifically, because I could potentially, if I wanted to, just go up from Guehi to Pedro Porro and not have to worry about the forward line switch as much, and then bring in Solanke next week if I still believe in Alvarez this week, because I have the money for it.
I would do that. If you can do that, right?
Yeah.
See, this is why I think sometimes you talk this stuff out with other people to get your own ideas out. So if you can do that, you move up to Porro, you start Porro for Trippier, right? Who is Newcastle playing? What's their fixture this weekend?
They're home at Fulham.
Home to Fulham, home with Fulham, and who does Wolves have?
Away to West Ham.
And Chelsea?
Home to Sheffield.
So I would actually, it's a coin flip for me between Gordon and Chan, because I think Gordon offers you the higher explosive potential, also is more risk for rotation, and is flagged as an injury. So for me, he probably is first on my bench. I would play the 3 strikers. I'd keep Alvarez, and I'd play him this week. I'd save my free transfer. I'd get, up to Porro. Next week, you get to bring Trippier back in. You have 4 playable, really every week defenders, unless you don't think Zinchenko's playing. One of them's going to be on your bench, obviously, with the lineup you have. And now the following week, you have 2 transfers where you can move off of Alvarez, and now you can either go down you could go to Solanke from Alvarez on his blank week, pocket a little money, and then you could reinvest your double transfer, your second transfer, to move off your midfielder, or you could just bang that transfer for another week, preparing yourself for, 18, 19, 20, when you have to move Son and Salah probably in back-to-back week for funds.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're going to probably, whether you want to do it and you have to hold your nose or not, you're going to bring back Holland because you're going to want to spend that money. You say you're not, but I'll see him on your team in match week 20.
I'm sitting here right now. I'm going to make you a promise. I am not bringing in Erling Haaland for the rest of the year. He is not going to be on my team any week for the rest of the year. You have my word.
That is ridiculous. Just right now, I'm telling you. I mean, you're going to spend so much money during that break. There's not anywhere to put that money. You don't want $4 million. $4 million sitting on your bench is just as bad as having, a $6 million player, or 2 $5 million, 2 $6 million keepers. It just doesn't. There's no logic behind it. If you have the players, you're going to see a time this year where it makes sense to bring in Haaland. I think you will, because I think you're a good player at this game, and you're going to want to keep getting green arrows. And eventually, when Son and Salah leave, a ton of money in this game gets opened. And I'm telling you right now, we should do this next week. Let's make our talking point segment. I liked our conversation point tonight when we kind of talked the Haaland thing and strategy around it. We should try to find a topic like that every week to break up the format. Maybe next week we should try to prepare and actually talk about the 5 to 6 week period, because I think this year's whole entire championship might actually be like the guy, the man or woman who makes the jump up the table and starts to compete this year that has never competed before in like the top 25 to 10,000 range of this game. I genuinely think that is going to be born out of the period of time of AFCON and the Asian Cup of Nations, because I actually think that during that period, the week to week differentials that people are going to be able to go out and get, and alternate captains, especially if like Holland was ever hurt, like really hurt and out for a bit.
Yeah.
It would be like the Wild Wild West. Because let's be honest, it goes Holland, Salah, Son. When it comes to every week guarantees, those are your captains. That's 1, 2, 3. People that say like Saka has a nice game once a month compared to what Mo Salah does weekly. Like it's not even, they're not even in the same ballpark. And to be honest, he's not as consistent, but he's actually like higher end prolific in Son, because he's more apt to give you 3 assists and a goal or 4 goals in a game even for whatever reason than Salah is. He goes silent for a couple games, but then he drops a 20 burger on you and you're like, what the Christ? Like you're 17, you walked out with this weekend only scoring 1 goal. You're like, how the hell did that happen? Oh, 3 assists, 3 bonus points, and a clean sheet later.
Yeah.
So as we get ready to get out of here, let's remind everyone, as always, please, if you are watching us right now on Facebook, head over to the YouTube channel and give it a subscribe. Sign up for the notifications. Follow all the programming, whether it be the Monday night podcast, the Thursday night podcast, this fantasy show, the Premier League show that gets released usually on Tuesdays, the panel show, or the morning coffee shows brought to you by our good friends at Reckless Coffee. My friend, we're getting close to the holidays here. You're already in the festive garb. That might have been because you were wearing that earlier. That might have been because you wanted to turn on the listeners. I'm not sure what it is or what it's about, but what are the plans for the holidays for you? Do you go away? Do you stick around? Do you have 2 families, 5 families? What is the stress level like?
Stress level is pretty low. Given I was born in Poland, and so most of my extended family outside of my immediate family is still overseas. So we don't really have anywhere to go. So it's always just us. And now I have my wife's family, which they're in the same exact boat. All of their family is still in Poland as well. So there's just the 2 of us, and we live about 45 minutes apart. So the entire family is going to get together. It's going to be a great old time. What about you?
So you guys do it all at one place? Both families, yours and her families, or you go to each house for a little bit, like the immediate families at 2 different times, 2 different places.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Christmas Eve, if you're aware of Polish culture, Christmas Eve is probably the most important day of the year. And so
I've been to a couple parties. There have been trays of alcohol served to everyone in the room.
See, that's supposed to be Christmas Day, not Christmas Eve, because technically there shouldn't be any alcohol or meat Christmas Eve. That's the big thing. So during Christmas Eve, we'll go to our separate families, but then Christmas Day we will get all together in one spot. So it's nice to kind of have that family time, the like original family time, and then the blended family time afterwards. It's a nice 1-2.
Now that you say it, actually, I don't think it actually was Christmas Eve because it was the afternoon. Like I went over after to a friend. I have friends who I played soccer with in high school. There were 2 brothers, and they were born in Poland, and they moved to this little town, and they could barely speak the language. And one kid showed up one day, and they were like, looked at the younger brother, and they were like, the kid's not old enough. And they're like, if we don't put him on the varsity team, he won't know how to talk to anyone. His brother speaks a little English. Yeah. He speaks none. So it was like one of those, like, well, I guess he plays varsity too because, well, who's going to teach him anything else? But they were great kids, and we went over there, and maybe it was actually the afternoon of Christmas Day, and it was pretty much like trays of shots to people, and it
It's
didn't really matter how old you were.
It could be any
an
of
amazing fun day.
It could be any of the 364 days outside of Christmas Eve. That would be totally understandable.
Yeah, the weddings I've gone to too are always the same way. It's a lot of room temperature vodka.
Oh yes, only.
And it was glorious until it's not, and then it's something else.
And then you wake up and you go, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, what Polish thing just happened to me? So I guess that's how you end a great fantasy program, people. You talk about Polish Christmas traditions. You talk about family plans. Our plans are pretty easy, actually, for me this year. My immediate family will do the Galvin family party. It's normally at our house. We're not hosting it this year, but it's about 14, 15 people because I got my 2 sisters and 6 nieces and nephews, all that stuff, my parents, all the partners and children, my great niece and nephew now that I'm such an old bastard that I have great nieces and nephews. It's ridiculous. But yeah, we'll all get together Saturday night, this Saturday, just because it's normally the Saturday before Christmas, this year that being one day before. And then Kel and I are actually going to travel to her family, to her parents for the holidays. So we'll be up in the Rochester, New York area and Western New York,
Cool.
Be over there. Actually, we've already planned it out. We're taking 2 cars because we're going to bring the dog and I'm going to bring him home and she'll stay for the week in between. But I'm already decided that I'm leaving at like 6 in the morning, Saturday morning, so I can get up to Rochester to get to the Liverpool bar so I can watch the Arsenal match. And then she's going to come up with the dog later, get to her parents before me as if I haven't left yet. And they won't know that I'm already in the neighborhood drinking. And then I'll just show up and they'll just think that their son-in-law is such a drunk that he actually got that drunk on the ride to Rochester, New York, which will just set off an awesome, awesome weekend. But no, my in-laws are great people. And the truth of the matter is they know what kind of a drunk I am. I've been with her for 13 years. So we're just kidding, people, as we digress. We appreciate you all for watching. We appreciate you all for listening and all that you do to help support us here at American Scouser. So from all of us, we will be back next week with a fantasy show. The fixtures come fast and heavy. I thought about maybe trying to do a video or 2, like private videos, and just kind of post them on the in-between weeks. So if you're up for one of those, man, just feel free to record one and just drop it out there on the YouTube channel. Because it's really hard right now for us to get together in between every match week when they start coming every 48 hours. So we'll talk more next week about the fixtures and planning for the holidays and about some of the deadlines. And from all of us at American Scouser TV, if we don't see you again, we hope you have a wonderful and safe holiday. All right, everyone, have a great week.